While I was doing my master's research into African e-learners, I went to Kenya and interviewed some learners who were learning online. And one of the men I met was Matthew. He was the academic dean of a historic seminary, and he had successfully completed one ITE course, but he dropped out for the second class. And when I interviewed him about why he had dropped out, he said, well, I can't learn from a teacher that I've never met. George Law, he's a human being, yes, but what about him? Let him come in person and we will talk about this. I need to shake his hand and hear how he sounds. Now, from a previous trip to Uganda, I met someone named Harrison, who happens to be here today, who talked to us about the importance of the handshake and taught my husband how to give a proper African handshake, yes? And the importance of establishing that rapport, that relationship, that area of trust. So when Matthew told me that, I thought of Harrison and thought of the importance of that bond and that establishment of trust that happens when you have a connection with someone physically. In the same way, written materials without knowing the author is automatically suspect then. Who is this person who has written this book? Why should I learn from him? So what is the extent of oral preference? Western nations, many of them claim pretty close to 100% literacy. But you know, even in Western nations on actual tests, only 50% are skilled enough to understand a complex document, like the Bible. These people could read well enough to fill out a job application, but they cannot read and understand literature, like the Bible. A high percentage of people who learn to read in school never pick up a book, never write a letter after they get out of school. So their skills that they maybe had when they were 18 just atrophies from disuse. They adopt a secondary orality, which is supported by the convenience of technology. So the best estimate is that at least 50 to 70% of the people in the world do not have sufficient skills to read and understand a Bible or a curriculum in their own language, and even more would rather watch TV or listen to something than study words on a page. At least 80% of the world, 5.7 billion people, are primarily oral communicators. Oh, and that 30%, the textual communicators who love to read and write, what do you think happens to them? They go on to become teachers. And they may not understand their students because the students may be oral learners, but most people who go on and go into education, we're the textual learners who love to read. So sometimes we're maybe cross and crabby and exacting, and we don't understand why our students don't learn well. So what kind of problems is this going to cause in our teaching and learning? Oral learners can extract complex, holistic principles from stories, either told dramatically or portrayed in skits, but they struggle to take disengaged principles and apply them in real-life situations. Book study, didactic literature, content-driven tests are the staple of Bible schools, aren't they? But tests about facts alone fail to assess whether a student really understands how to apply what he's learned. At my table during the plenary session, my friend Jack was telling me that he was asked to be part of the exam board for a Master of Divinity degree at a school in India. He was asked to question the students and to make sure that, confirm that they were ready for their master's degree in their specialty. And so he thought, well, I'll start with a really simple question. And so there was a student who was his Master of Divinity was with the emphasis in evangelism. So Jack says, you've been called to an accident scene and a man is bleeding to death on the pavement. Please tell us the gospel message that you could share with him in 5 minutes before the time runs out and he bleeds to death. So the student, the one asking for a master's degree in evangelism, he kind of hemmed and hawed and looked down. He says, well, I guess I'd just tell him to read his Bible. Now, too bad for the dying man who was not at that point able to read his Bible. And it's hard to say what the student had learned in 4 years of studying about evangelism, but whatever it was, he had not gained any ability to lead the dying man to faith in Christ. Without stories that show concepts applied in the messiness and the complexity and the ambiguities of real life, all people, but especially oral learners, may have only gathered useless information. So why is it that dramas and pictures are preferred by so many people, even those of us who are not primarily oral learners? We love stories. Why is that? One reason is that according to neuroscience, 2/3 of your brain operates when you're processing a picture, and only 1/3 of your brain operates when decoding words. Therefore, the learning that occurs from a picture is grasped more quickly and smoothly than learning from communicating in a concept of words. The pictures may be photographs or cartoons, or maybe the pictures that are drawn in your mind when you tell someone a story. Even better, stories that engage your emotions tag that image with a "do not erase" label by the brain, so you're going to remember it much longer when your emotions are involved. So that's a little overview of oral preference learners, and I hope you caught that both Belle and Gaston may have been oral preference, and just because Belle could read, she was reading a story. If you saw the Beauty and the Beast movie, she was loving the story of knights in shining armor, and so even though she was able to read, she was still taking her teaching from stories. So what can we do as pastoral trainers that will help those oral preference learners to stay engaged and also make learning better for all of us? We're going to gather again in small groups, and I want you to discuss 3 questions and choose someone who will report back to us. The first question is, what kind of learning, what sorts of activities have you done to accommodate orality in your training, and how well did it work or not? And number 2, are there some ideas that you've had of what you'd like to try that you want to discuss with the group? And number 3, what resources can you recommend? And as far as those resources, if someone can jot those down and bring them up to the front when you leave.